Today we're going to commemorate the 100th anniversary of U.S. involvement in World War I.
Why are people like us interested in World War I when most of us Americans have such short memories? As time goes by, we Americans have a tendency to put history further and further back. And yet World War I, to me, is the seminal event of the whole 20th century as well as the 21st. This war is still with us. It's not over. All our troubles in the Middle East, all our troubles elsewhere can be tied to this war. A war that when I introduce this in the lectures I give throughout the Bay Area or wherever I'm asked to speak to SIRS or to Rotary clubs or high schools or junior colleges, I tell them it was a war that was started by a teenager.
A Serbian named Gavrilo Princip assassinated the Archbishop Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Hungarian throne in Sarajevo. By August 4th, all the major and several minor powers of Europe were at war. The Allies consisted of the French Republic, the British Empire, and Tsarist Russia, along with Belgium and Serbia. Their enemy was the Central Powers of the German and Austro-Hungarian empires. Within a year, the Ottoman Empire had joined the Central Powers. Italy and Japan joined the Allies. Fighting spread from Europe to the Middle East, Africa, China, and all the oceans of the world. At the beginning of the war, Germany had great success, almost capturing Paris and decisively defeating a Russian invasion. Yet within months, the war devolved into a stalemate. By 1915, there was a continuous line of trenches spreading from the English Channel to Switzerland.
Help stamp out the Kaiser, buy government bonds. I didn't know whether you know this, but German Americans felt very uncomfortable with the declaration of war, naturally, and those that were of Austrian and Hungarian as well. But nobody bought more government bonds in World War I than the German Americans. There were 2.5 million American soldiers in France from 1917 to 1918, with another 2 million here ready to go. At the end of the war, when the Germans asked for an armistice, and there was about 3-day sort of silence after the war, an American newsman went to go see Hindenburg, the German general. And he asked him, why did Germany surrender? And Hindenburg said bluntly, it's the arrival of the Americans. And this stunned him. So he no sooner came back and he spread that all over America. So we became convinced that America really won the war of World War I. It's debatable, but it's an issue that still is very current. My favorite story is the story about the German ambassador, Count Bernsdorf, who was in America for 11 years. His wife was American. He loved American way of life. He was the doyen before the war of all ambassadors in Washington. When he got back to Germany, the first thing he was asked by the German government is, why did America go to war with us? And his answer was very straightforward. He said, you invaded Belgium, and Belgium's neutrality was violated, and that turned America against you.
From about 1890 to 1917, there was going on in the United States the thought of progressivism. And their major thrust was towards the industrialization of the United States, the urbanization, the immigration, and the corruption in government. What would another war do about these issues? And here are the issues. And this was what is in the back of their mind. These are our leaders now, prior to the war. Their interests were regulating business, reforming government, improving working conditions, improving health, working for women's rights, and conserving natural resources. You see nothing in there about war. And why did the American public change its non-war thinking? The German atrocities in Belgium, certainly in 1914, 1915, didn't help that they shot Edith Cavell. Least we forget, as the British favorite saying. But here is the publications that came out, and they talked about many of them being Americans. And here is the problem that really existed when the readers of our newspapers, and this one out of Atlanta, many women and children. And I reemphasize what Sal said. This was the point that went to home, children being killed. So it was unrestricted submarine warfare occurred in the early part of 1917. And we see there that from February 7th to April 4th, 1917, U-boats sink 10 U.S. ships without warning, 24 deaths. You might be interested in the total number of ships throughout the whole war. 176 American ships were torpedoed by submarines, creating 600 deaths.
In 1914, Irving Berlin, already one of America's most famous popular music composers, wrote an anti-war song called Stay Down Here Where You Belong.
Down below, sat the devil talking to his son, who wanted to go up above, up above. He cried, "It's getting too warm for me down here, and so I'm going up on earth where I can have a little fun." The devil simply shook his head and answered his son, "Stay down here where you belong. The folks who live up there above you don't know right from wrong. To please their kings, they've all gone out to war, and not a one of them knows what he's fighting for. Way up above, they say that I'm a devil and I'm bad. Kings up there are bigger devils than your dad. They're breaking the hearts of mothers, making butchers out of brothers. You'll find more hell up there than there is down below. Kings up there, they don't care for the mothers who must stay at home, their sorrows to bear. Stay at home, don't you roam. Although it's warm down below, you'll find it's warmer up there. If e'er you went up there, my son, I know you'd be surprised. You'd find a lot of people are not civilized."
With the torpedoing of Lusitania, Germany scores the largest individual triumph of the war on British commerce. What effect the loss of the Lusitania will have upon British overseas shipping generally is a matter for speculation. It cannot possibly cease altogether. Risk must be run, or Britain would be even more completely blockaded than Germany. The question as to whether there were American citizens on board the Lusitania does not call for discussion in this connection. Our people have had ample warning and should know that when they step aboard a British ship, they are consigning themselves to the protection of a nation which at present can offend and offer very little security for those at sea.
In January of 1916, Pancho Villa's forces stopped a train in Mexico and shot 18 mining engineers. As a result, Pancho Villa was driven into the hills. Probably to obtain supplies on March 9, 1916, Pancho Villa led his men across the border and attacked Columbus, New Mexico. In this battle, 22 American soldiers and civilians were killed. The San Francisco Chronicle's headline illustrates the reaction of the American public.
Women killed by outlaw band in New Mexico raid. 16 American citizens slaughtered in early dawn as they seek safety from bandits. Torch applied to homes and business houses by incendiary bands, told off by Mexican ravisher. 2 perish in hotel fire trap. Wives of Army officers have narrow escaped from raiders' bullets.
President Wilson ordered John J. Pershing, who was stationed at the Presidio in San Francisco, to lead an expedition of 6,000 men to capture or kill Pancho Villa. Pershing's expedition chased Pancho Villa's forces and fought several actions. While Pancho Villa himself escaped capture, his military forces were dispersed and the danger to the U.S. neutralized. Germans realized it was trade with the United States that was keeping Britain and France in the war. The British blockade, which the naval battle of Jutland failed to break, was putting increasing pressure on the Central Powers. Still not using their submarines, the Germans turned to sabotage to try to cut off Allied supplies. German agents, organized by the ambassador, successfully sabotaged a number of munition plants. On July 30th, bombs set off an enormous explosion of warehouses, starting munitions on Jersey City. 7 people were killed. The Statue of Liberty was damaged in the enormous blast. As the likelihood of America becoming involved in the war increased, calls for being prepared in the event we entered the war, the San Francisco Chronicle described the blast, which calls in mind a more recent attack on American soil.
The detonations, which were felt in 5 states, began with a continuous rapid fire of small shells, the billowing up of great quantities of dynamite, TNT, and other high explosives, flowing by the bursting of thousands and thousands of shrapnel shells, which literally showed the surrounding countryside and waters for miles around. Fires that started soon after the first great crash, which spread death and destruction in its wake, destroyed 13 of the huge warehouses of the National Storage Company. The flames shooting into the clouds were reflected against New York's skyline of towering office buildings, which only a few moments before were shaken to their foundation by an earthquake. Miles of streets in Manhattan were strewn with broken glass and shattered signs.
In San Francisco on July 22, 1916, barely a half hour before the 51,000 marchers began moving, a steel plate bomb filled with metal slugs exploded near the Ferry Building. The Chronicle, then is now a morning paper, reported on the bomb the next day. A list of the dead and wounded noted natives not only of San Francisco, but of Oakland, Alameda, Mill Valley, Berkeley, and one from Los Angeles. Women, men, and children were killed.
The massive crowd around the corner was mowed down as if the bomb had been a machine gun. The concussion of the explosion was terrific. It shattered the plate glass windows nearby, knocked people off their feet, and left almost a shambles of Stewart Street for 150 feet off Market. The bomb outrage failed to disrupt the parade. 2 minutes after it happened, the columns of marching men and women were making their way along Stewart and up Market Street to martial airs played by bands while the clanging bells of ambulances and police patrols made hubbub about them. "It is war," one elderly veteran said as he hobbled under the hot sun from Stewart into Market Street. The Harbor Emergency Hospital was filled with victims of the bomb tragedy, and there were not sufficient ambulances to convey the dead and wounded to the hospital or morgue.
So the Germans sought out Mexico as a partner, and the Germans' empire, State Secretary for the Foreign Affairs, Arthur Zimmerman, wrote Mexico a telegram.
"We intend to begin on the 1st of February unrestricted submarine warfare. We shall endeavor in spite of this to keep the United States of America neutral. In the event of this not succeeding, we make Mexico a proposal alliance on the following basis: make war together, make peace together, generous financial support, and an understanding on our part that Mexico is to reconquer the lost territory in Texas, New Mexico, and Arizona." Excuse me for interrupting, but I wonder why they didn't include California, like we weren't important enough. "The settlement in detail is left to you. You will inform the President of the above most secretly as soon as the outbreak of war with the United States of America is certain, and add the suggestion that he should, on his own initiative, invite Japan to immediate adherence and at the same time mediate between Japan and ourselves. Please call the President," he means the President of Mexico, "attention to the fact that the ruthless employment of our submarine now offer the prospect of compelling England in a few months to make peace." Signed, Zimmerman.
Now, with the Zimmerman note, the President just saw how serious the Germans were. Wilson signed an executive order arming merchant ships and cut off diplomatic relations with Germany. Then, as he was making his last fateful decision, Germany sunk 3 ships in one day. Wilson, the man who'd kept us out of the war, felt he had no choice.
In just 5 months, the president goes to Congress and goes for a war declaration. Strong Navy, 500,000 men, full cooperation with German foes. The president asked, "What else can I do? Is there anything else I can do?" And he describes that this vote would kill American boys. Anyhow, it passed. War is declared by the U.S.
From April 1917 to the armistice November 11th, 1918, almost 3 million Americans wore the uniform of the United States Army and the Marine Corps, with about 1 million serving in France. 116,515 died. More than 150,000 Californians served in uniform. Some 3,300 lost their lives. The California World War I Centennial Task Force, along with other state task forces and commissions, and the National World War I Centennial, will be holding events and providing resources to commemorate the Great War and honor the sacrifice of those who fought in it. I invite you all to join us.